Hi, I'm Paul.
And I'm Tiffany.
To some, we could be called career wizards.
And to others, sometimes we seem like therapists. However, we definitely are not.
But for you, we are the co hosts of the Career Boosters podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Career Boosters podcast, season 2, episode 14. I just say it's crazy every time. It's just
I
wild
know.
to me to say that
Time
many.
flies.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Hmm
This week you get just the hosts, just the
Eh,
coaches. It's crazy, just the two of us.
just us.
We are, and the thing that's going to be cool about this is just us kind of talking back and forth regarding emotional intelligence. And so, not sure if that's good or bad, but this is what we're going with. So we're going to
Find
see
out.
how this goes. So, last night I was doing a presentation to project managers and was asked a question. What is one thing new managers should work on that will make them great leaders? And immediately out of my mouth was emotional intelligence. And I didn't even, that was my gut and my intuition really speaking. It
Mhm.
wasn't even a thoughtful thing. A lot of, and when we think about emotional intelligence, a lot of the times we think just, oh, I have empathy. So that means I have a great level of emotional intelligence. Well,
Mhm.
uh, that is not the case. There's
Nope.
so much more to it. And when we drove our students through the second part of our emotional intelligence classes, we referenced this model, this EQI model. And I'm just going to go through just kind of what it at the basis of what it is and kind of go from there. So first is the self-perception. So how we see ourselves. Then it goes into like how we express and how we express our emotions. We then have how we work with other people, how we build relationships with other people. It's called the interpersonal space. We then have how do our emotions get in the way of decision making? And then finally, it's just how do we manage stress? And so
Mhm.
when I think about emotional intelligence, those are really nice little buckets to group it all within.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think, Tiffany? What do you take away? What do you think about this thing called
Yeah.
emotional intelligence?
I'm with you on everybody thinks that it's empathy. The other piece that people seem to misunderstand is this I get along with others because I'm such a giver, right? I am really in tune with what other people need. I am really happy to give all of my time, my effort.
Hmm.
Somebody comes along and asks for help, and I'm there. Therefore, I am really emotionally intelligent or I'm really great at relationships. And a common misconception or misunderstanding is that really emotionally intelligent relationships are mutual.
Yeah.
And so this interplay of back and forth, sure, you give a lot of help, but do you ask for it? Do
Hmm.
you receive it?
Hmm.
Do you allow people to help you? And that's
Hmm.
quite often when most of us go, no, I don't like asking for help,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
makes me seem weak. That makes me,
Yeah.
I don't want to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Now we're in a space of actually lesser emotional intelligence. So there's
Hmm.
two, those are to me the two biggest
Hmm.
misconceptions that we try to myth bust with students and then
Hmm.
build kind of more emotional intelligence library of understanding. But that
Hmm.
one comes up a lot for me.
It's interesting that you talk about that because there is this one kind of component of this tool, and it's called independence, right? And it's
Mhm,
not needing to lean on people as
mhm,
much, and it's this fine balance, this fine, we have to strike this balance of what that looks like. I would probably consider myself somebody that flies into the other calendar or the other part of what that looks like. But for me, that's okay. Like, when I need help, I will reach out and ask for it. And I know when that is to be taken, right? And the
mhm,
funny thing is I just redid this EQI assessment. It's been about 5 years. And when we gave people information about what this tool is and emotional intelligence, we can look at it peaking kind of 50 to 60 years old, whatever we want to look at. And I'm getting
mhm.
closer to that than I am to 20. So understanding kind of how that works out, and I saw my independence score kind of go up a little bit, and initially I was a bit taken aback by that, but then when I think about who I am, that's okay. Like it is, I am a very autonomous person. I do things on my own when I need to. I'm very comfortable with my, who I am and things like that. So I don't know.
Mhm.
It's interesting. Would I call myself lacking in emotional intelligence? Not in any way, right? But I think that it was interesting to me to see that being high.
And I can, from somebody who interacts with you a lot, who sometimes we kind of live in each other's sort of back pockets doing the same
Hmm.
job, but with different groups of students.
Hmm.
To work with somebody highly independent, it's really great that you and I both have an emotional intelligence
Hmm.
understanding. And not only that, I happen to know that you are highly independent,
Hmm.
because as somebody who's a little bit less so, who's a little bit
Hmm.
more in the middle, I need both. I enjoy
Hmm.
people who allow me to help.
Hmm.
But I also enjoy people who are able to take their own initiative,
Hmm.
and be independent. And so to
Hmm.
understand that you and I can have this interplay of, if I'm offering help and your gut reaction is, no, 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 I'm okay, I can offer it again and say, hang on a
Hmm.
second, no, I can actually help here. And I
Hmm.
watch you go, oh yeah, you can. That's okay. All right,
Hmm.
so your ability to see that in the moment is helpful.
Thanks. And it's that's a work in progress, I would say, and even for other parts of these skills or whatever
Hmm.
we want to talk about it, part of this, EQI model, there it sometimes just takes some time to like
Hmm.
understand what these things mean. And
Hmm.
it sometimes takes time to understand when I need to action them and when I need to like step
Hmm.
back and not action them. And so
Hmm.
that's the thing I found interesting. And I can speak to from especially from the sports coaching that I do, impulse control is something that I feel like I have a lot of, but then when someone that I care about is like being hurt or there is
Hmm.
like they're being wronged, my impulse control goes out the window and I'm like firing because I want to protect. You want to like safety
Hmm.
for others, right? And so
Hmm.
it's interesting when you think about, these little components and how they show up. But also,
Hmm.
at least my understanding is at least I know that when my impulse control is over the top, I need to step back and
Hmm.
regroup, right? So,
What about the
yeah.
flip side of your impulse control? So when you're highly emotionally charged, right, you
Hmm.
see a difference. But what about the other way when you're maybe actually kind of holding on to the impulse control too
Yeah.
much? What does that show up like?
Well, I have no hair on the top of my head, so that definitely speaks to stress and stress
We need to
management.
add that to the model.
So, yeah, yeah, yeah. If you have too high impulse control and you hold it too deep in, you're going to lose the hair on the top of
Possible
your
side
head.
effects
Yeah,
of too
possible
much
side effects of too much impulse
impulse control.
control. Yeah. I just think stress comes,
Hmm.
right? And you hold on to it with no ability to release or no ability to say,
Mm.
"Oh gosh, this is really frustrating me in this moment," right? And
Hmm.
so and as someone who, I'm big. I like to be protective of people. That's hard, right? Like and
Hmm.
we have these big burly people and they shouldn't be talking about emotions, but really that's what
Hmm.
helps us move through the day. So,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
I have a similar impact with assertiveness. So that's another
Hmm.
one of these EQ skill sets that we talk about. And
Hmm.
mine is on the lower side, which
Hmm.
is not shocking to both myself and to people who've interacted with me. But you
Yeah,
talk about this. What's the downside? What's the warning label we should add
yeah.
to assertiveness? I think there's a
Hmm.
warning label for if you're really perhaps high in over indexing,
Hmm.
and more myself a little bit on the lower side. It's what do I internalize that I
Hmm.
am not allowing myself to get out, that I'm
Hmm.
not allowing myself to maybe kind of stand up in a little bit more confidently. If I'm not, where
Hmm.
the heck does that go? Well, it just
Hmm.
stays internally. I still have
Yeah,
all my hair,
yeah.
but I've
Lucky.
got other, yeah, I'm sorry. I've got a few other impacts
Hmm.
that certainly shows up in.
Hmm.
And funny how when we aren't able to use some of these skill sets perhaps in the most effective way, how we ourselves end up internalizing it.
Yeah. What a great point. It's, we take it in, right? And
Mhm.
and that is going to cause an emotion. And so we give the students, we let them use these emotion wheels. We bring them to almost every
Mhm.
class. How are we feeling in this moment, right? I think
Mhm.
if we can start to label some of the things that we're holding on to, it just starts to normalize them a little bit, right?
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
which I think is really
If
powerful.
it's that if it's mentionable, it's manageable. So
That's
can you
good. Yeah.
mention it even internally?
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
language it to yourself internally?
Yeah. And
Hmm.
I feel that same way. Not going through the whole story, but this weekend was playing. We were in a soccer tournament. I coach. Kids getting hurt all over the place, and you feel
Mm.
yourself over the top. And I literally just said to myself, "Gosh, I'm angry right now." But I
Mm.
feel like that's okay. Like anger
Mhm.
is an emotion. It is a feeling,
Mhm.
and if we can understand it, we can start to lower it a little bit, right? It's why
Mhm.
am I angry right now? Thinking about those things to yourself. When
Yeah,
we think about emotional intelligence, though, empathy is part of this model. So yes, it's
it
a
is, yes.
component of it. How do
Mhm.
you talk about empathy?
I heard a really interesting thing recently because it's typical to hear, can you put yourself in someone else's shoes? And I
Hmm.
think fundamentally that's there's a lot of things kind of wrong with that framing.
Yeah.
Excuse me. There's a lot of bias and a lot of privilege and a lot
Hmm.
of inequity that really actually comes into play that we don't realize. And so I
Hmm.
heard somebody talk about it the other day that, to really be empathetic with someone, especially when it's hard to be empathetic with someone in the moment, so when
Hmm.
emotions are present,
Hmm.
are you still able to see that person as a child?
Hmm.
Like, can you see the inner humanity of
Hmm.
someone? Now, to link back
Hmm.
to our last podcast on emotional
Hmm.
intelligence,
Hmm.
especially if you're having a hard time empathizing with that person. Are you, perhaps the empathy skill set is to be able to separate yourself a bit and still see someone as a child. We all
Hmm.
were children at some point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
can you have empathy for, the inner humanity in someone?
Interesting.
Hmm.
I think it's Brené Brown, right? It's when somebody's in a hole, you kind of crawl in there
Yep.
with them, right? And
Hmm.
it's not about dragging them out of the hole. It's not about
Yeah.
giving them the answers to get out, the ladder to get out, whatever it is. It's just sitting there being like,
Hmm.
this stinks, right? So
Hmm.
I find myself in coaching opportunities, not, I think us as Canadians, we always, oh, I'm sorry that's going on for you,
Hmm.
or, things like that. I find myself just saying, like, that must be hard, right? Like, and
Hmm.
I think that empathy is just being like, damn, that sucks, and
Yeah.
my being the sneaker person I am, the way I'm trying to
Hmm.
describe empathy
Hmm.
is,
Hmm.
I love Brené Brown, and I read this book. It's called Tiny Dragon, Big Panda, and
Hmm.
the tiny dragon is in a hole, and it says, sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in a hole, and then the panda goes, let me crawl in there with you, and I think that's a
Yeah.
really cool like analogy. But for me,
Hmm.
being a sneaker person, it's like, I'm not going to live in your shoes, but I'm going to put my shoes beside you, and I'm going to just be
Hmm.
there with you, right? And we deal with students that have pressures and stresses. We deal with corporate clients that have pressures and stresses, and just letting them say it, I think is a beautiful thing.
I see a direct tie there to somewhere that I know we both coach in with a lot of different people. And so another skill set here is reality testing.
Hmm.
And so, how can you be really objective to both objectively see your reality and
Hmm.
perhaps test other realities? And to me,
Hmm.
that's directly tied with empathy. Even if
Hmm.
I can't or don't understand what you're going through, can I
Hmm.
challenge and test different realities to try to
Hmm.
perhaps identify with the reality in which you are sitting?
Yeah.
I love the simple question of what else could be true.
Yeah.
We end up so stuck in what we perceive to be our reality
Yeah.
that it can be really hard to see anything else.
Yeah. Cool.
I don't know. What do you see within that?
Yeah, the thing is, you were talking about that, the thing that I really find interesting within this interpersonal space that they have in this model that we work with, empathy is built in that space. And we give the analogy of a three-legged chair when you think of balance, and we have empathy as the stool like that you sit on. Then you have the emotional self-awareness. Am I aware of the emotions that are going through me? Reality testing, which you just
Mm-hmm.
said, like, what am I
Mm-hmm.
seeing? Like, what is really happening in front of me?
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one is emotional expression. And so,
Mm-hmm.
how am I displaying the emotions that I'm displaying, right? When I'm crawling in that hole with you, am I agitated that I'm getting in the hole, or am I just,
Mm-hmm.
I am in there with you, right? Am I present with you,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that? So what do I think about that? I think that empathy comes from presence, and
Mm-hmm.
being present, and just having the ability to be willing to sit with people. So that's the way I kind of think about it.
I like that emotional expression that you just talked about. And we see this a lot in leadership that there's an assumption that you need to be as a leader unflappable,
Yeah.
right? You need to be resilient. You need to be the commander in charge
Hmm.
that isn't worried about something. And
Hmm.
while that's true in some cases, and yes, having the flip side of a leader that's perhaps emotionally reactive to everything, also
Hmm.
not effective. If you
Hmm.
think of someone who is very reserved and isn't expressing much emotion,
Hmm.
from a team perspective or somebody looking up to that leader, it can often feel cold and disconnected.
Hmm.
I need to know that you're human and
Yeah.
that you are also perhaps experiencing something similar. If we're all experiencing the same change, maybe,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that maybe you're also worried too.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do we understand that emotional expression doesn't make us weak
No.
or riskily, let's make up a word, riskily vulnerable?
Mm-hmm. The way I look at it is how are you communicating things?
Mhm,
That's both verbally and non-verbally, right? It's
mhm.
and I joked about it in class. I have a terrible poker face. Like people know if I'm like
Yeah,
pretty
me too.
disappointed in something or if I'm, not feeling it. But I also people hopefully know that like when things are going well, you're going to experience like lots of energy, lots of joy,
Mhm,
lots of emotion coming that way too,
mhm.
and happiness, right? Go
Do
ahead.
you remember what you said to me recently? And it probably not, but it stuck with me. You and I were chatting about something, and it was something where I think we had a little bit of a difference of opinion, or I did. And so my
Mm-hmm.
face said it, and
Mm-hmm.
out of your mouth came, well, your face says what you're thinking. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
My face is saying what I'm thinking.
Absolutely.
Oops.
And I do that. God, like I do that all the time. And it's funny. We have all of these, love and crazy with strengths. We have, you get the best of me when, you get the worst of me when, all of these
Mhm.
things. And, sometimes I feel for my own family because they kind of get the worst parts of me. And I know like my poker face is like just dead by the end of the day. So it's like you're gonna just
Mhm.
get what you get. And so
Mhm.
but with that being said, I think that we can also take the breaks we need to show up for the
Mhm.
people and in the times that we need to take those, right? And if I think about my emotional intelligence and where it needs to grow, I don't think it needs to grow too much more in the world of professionalism, but in personal life, I think it has a
Mhm.
lot of space to grow. So,
Mhm.
and it's all attached to the same thing, right? I have the skill set to work through it, but I think it's just the ability to practice what you preach. So,
And the domino effect I find of working on one thing and how that impacts something
yeah,
else.
yeah,
And working with students, I often see that domino starting with the self-regard. And we haven't talked about that
yeah,
just yet, but the piece
yeah,
of self-confidence, belief in
yeah,
self.
yeah,
Paul has the believe sign behind him of Ted
yeah,
Lasso, and we have
yeah,
that in our office, but it is a struggle bus for
yeah,
a lot of people. And what's
yeah,
interesting is that even for people who have it in a normal range, kind of
yeah,
whatever normal is,
yeah,
or even the high side, there's still probably pockets where it's a challenge. And I had that just
yeah.
recently coming up to doing something that was brand new for me
Mm,
in a space that felt riskier for me, that
mm-hmm,
had a potential to kind of push against, well, an assertiveness skill set that I
mm-hmm,
feel not as strong in.
mm,
And so while I am a relatively confident person, and I certainly come across that way, my goodness, did I find a pocket of that
mm,
was shaky within
mm-hmm,
myself. And so
mm-hmm,
even understanding when you're relatively, like you just said, or professionally, right? You've
mm-hmm,
kind of got this skill set of EQ, but we
mm-hmm.
can all find pockets where we're probably going to need to work on them.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I'll make a comment. You don't know what other people's pockets look like. And so it's the
Mm-hmm.
ability to ask and it's the ability to get deep within kind of the connection space to do that. And,
Mm-hmm.
I bring this up all the time about myself. It's, I struggle with anxiety. For heaven's sakes, I have like the little character of anxiety right
Yeah.
here. And I can relate to that so wholeheartedly. But at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, I challenge myself to do things that are hard because in my professional life, probably more than my personal life, but there's great reward that comes from some of those
Mm-hmm.
things, and that helps build confidence. And people
Mm-hmm.
would think this self-regard piece, this self-actualization, if we look at it in the world of strengths, at the end of the day, you don't know what people are dealing with, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
know how people deal with things, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
instead of making an assumption, ask the questions is the way that I would kind of propose that.
Yeah, I don't know if you get this, and I'm sure you do, but I won't put words in your mouth. What I get all the time is, how can you be struggling with that? You're such a confident person,
Yeah,
right? Or you've got this, you know how to do this. And so as I
yeah,
was approaching this thing that was truly making me nervous
yeah.
to hear people from such a place of intent
Mm-hmm,
say these really great things,
mm-hmm.
but not taking the moment to ask of, oh, hey, how come this does have you a bit worried? Like, what
Yeah,
is it about this is that's maybe different than something else?
yeah.
uh, I find taking that moment for curiosity And it's
Hmm.
interesting, you just mentioned two pieces, self-actualization. So do you set goals for yourself and believe that you can achieve them, which would
Achieve
be
them.
some of the
Yeah.
self-regard?
Hmm.
That was where I was. This
Hmm.
self-actualization was one heck of a stretch.
Hmm.
And so I was pushing the boundaries there, which then also pushed my self-regard boundaries. And I
Hmm.
appreciated the people who were curious. You were
Hmm.
one. I know
Hmm.
you were curious and super supportive, but
Hmm.
yeah, how do we lean into that curiosity bit?
I think at the end of the day, we're coaches. Like that's all we
Mhm.
live in, right? It's the, if it, and the thing that I would say to that is if we feel it's necessary, right?
Mhm.
And I think curiosity it can sometimes go too far. Like it's,
Mhm.
I think we can go too far down a rabbit hole that we maybe don't need to go
Mhm.
within.
Mhm.
But the way I look at it is showing concern, showing curiosity to somebody is
Mhm.
demonstrating that you are with them, right? That you
Mhm.
you want to know more about them. And instead of you got this or this must seem very easy for you, it's
Mhm.
what has helped you make it seem so easy, right? And then truly
Mm.
what does it look like?
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting I feel like I just live in a world of curiosity where I just ask questions and that has never
Mhm.
failed me. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
I just had a conversation with someone we hadn't met before. It was a bit of a sort of a coffee chat networking call.
Hmm.
And it sort of turned into a bit of a coaching session because
Hmm.
that's just a natural place
Yeah.
where I go in into coaching world. And it
Yeah.
was appropriate in this conversation. It was welcomed and it was appreciated. But I think as coaches, to your point, not everybody wants to be coached in the moment. So
Hmm.
not everybody
Hmm.
wants necessarily perhaps your curiosity. So how do you use emotional
Hmm.
intelligence to
Yeah.
try to understand in the moment what's appropriate?
Yeah. Yeah. And it, I always, it's interesting. I think about the world of recruitment, and recruitment is like
Mm.
this, it's this, it's this. And they say very little trust of judgment and intuition. And
Mm.
when I was a recruiter, that's all I did was like rely on my intuition. And I know that for some people, they're like, well, that you can't do that. Like that's not the way.
Mhm.
But you know what? I worked for 7 years in recruitment. I don't think I ever had to replace anybody that I like. I think there's just intuition and gut and let us trust that part of our own
Mhm.
emotions, right? Like
Mhm.
that I think there's so much power to that. And while you're showing and demonstrating curiosity, like trust your judgment, trust your intuition. It will lead you in a good way.
Mhm. There's a
Hmm.
reason there's more connections between literally our gut
Yeah.
and our brain than
Yeah.
any other organ.
Yeah.
It truly
Well,
is a
and
powerful piece.
yeah, and when we think about anxiety for me
Mm.
lives in the gut, and that's like,
Mhm.
and so sure, it may not be like my face is flushed and I'm trembling, like,
Mhm.
it's not like that, but guess what? Inside, that's kind of what's happening. It's chaos,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so yeah, yeah. So
Mm.
yeah, and it's not necessarily in my head. It's more in my gut, and that's so weird to think about because, the brain is the thing that's challenging you, but it's your gut that's speaking speaking to you.
The
So
loudest. Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah,
There's one more I wouldn't mind to touch on before we
sure.
head to maybe our own lightning round, and
Yep,
that's optimism.
sure.
And perhaps even a misconception around optimism of, somehow just needing to be happier, perhaps, or to
Hmm.
just somehow magically think everything's going to be okay.
Hmm.
And that's just not what an emotional, intelligent approach to optimism is.
No.
Do you have thoughts on that one?
Is an interesting one for me. I think when I believe what optimism means is just trying to, I like to lean in and leverage that growth mindset, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm going to just kind of do the best I can in this situation and just go with it, right? We think about, we had our students at stats midterms time, just,
Mhm.
with the approach of, I'll just do the best that I can. I'll prepare
Mhm.
myself in the way that I can, and I'll be optimistic that the outcome will just be what it is, right? And it's interesting when I look at my
Mhm.
whole report and all my scores, this is something that falls lower on the scales for me.
Mhm.
However, it is almost balanced with all the
Mhm.
other things in that
Mm.
category, and so which that's okay. And I don't think I'm the most like the world is awesome and that's it. Like it, I think it is. There's a
Mhm.
realism to it, but there's also emotions attached to optimism, and to me, I really like to leverage that growth mindset piece and really just having a good space to like lean into when it comes to optimism. What about you?
I I'm known for being a very optimistic person
Hmm.
on many fronts, but it's interesting that you talk about a growth mindset. And sometimes optimism for someone can just be, I love one little small powerful word of yet. I'm not good at this yet.
Yeah.
I'm not certain about where I'm going after the MBA yet.
Hmm.
And so, while that may not seem like a massively optimistic outlook, it
Hmm.
is a growth mindset that allows you to be open to what optimistic options might be out there.
Hmm.
And so, for people struggling with optimism, can you just start with a word like yet
Hmm.
and a little bit of opening to the possibility?
Yeah.
The next certification on my list of things to get, which I've been on a bit of a rampage on certifications recently,
Hmm.
so needing to temper that a bit, but is positive psychology.
Hmm.
I am just fascinated by the brain science behind optimism and growth
Hmm.
mindset and truly what that
Hmm.
does at a kind of, well, brain level.
Hmm.
And I bring that into a lot of my coaching to
Hmm.
really understand there's a science behind it. It's not just a
Yeah.
fluffy way of looking at life. There is
Yeah.
science behind it. So
Yep.
cool.
That's cool. I'm just going to add one thing. I loved how you said yet, right? And when I think about how and when I coach people, it's maybe if somebody's coming up against something that's really intense, really scary for them.
Mhm.
When have you faced something that has been scary before, right? And
Mhm.
and how did you deal with it? How did you manage it, right? What were
Mhm.
some of the emotions tied to that? And if we can be optimistic about
Mhm.
conquering something because we've conquered something similar in the past.
Yep.
Like that's so helpful. I was saying that to myself last night. I'm going to this presentation. I've been to the Canadian government to do this. I've done this
Yeah.
in different faculties. I've done this before, right? And
Mhm.
reframing that, it really helped, and it helped me be optimistic that this was going to go well as well, right? So, and
Mhm.
I think that if we can even just have our own inner coach to ask us these things,
Yeah.
when has great things happened, right? So, yeah,
I did the same thing doing a Pechakucha in
yeah.
May for people.
Hmm.
5 minute presentation, 20 slides,
Hmm.
15 seconds a slide. Like, dear Lord, if you
Hmm.
want to challenge yourself, go try to do a
Hmm.
Pechakucha. So
Hmm.
I envisioned what success would look like because I hadn't done it
Hmm.
before. So if you
Nice.
don't
Yeah.
have the thing in your
Hmm.
past, how can you even just picture what success looks like? So I
Yeah.
did put myself
Yeah.
there, put an audience in front of me, pictured them
Nice.
clapping.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Nice.
I love that approach.
Hmm. Cool.
Should we try a emotional intelligent framed lightning round?
Sure.
I
You
don't
ask the
really know what that
questions,
means.
I'll answer,
Yeah,
and then you can answer them, or
sure.
or vice versa. You
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
answer, and then I'll answer.
So we're going to do a little bit of a twist. So
Hmm.
how about what part of emotional intelligence has given us the biggest boost, would you say?
Sure. For me, it is understanding how to frame and work with empathy.
For me, it's understanding that growth in assertiveness will not decrease self-worth.
Hmm.
All right. What do
Nice.
we wish we had learned sooner from an emotional intelligence perspective?
Impulse control will make you lose your hair.
You'd have flowing locks
I
otherwise.
would I would
Knew
have
it.
the longest, most luscious hair that you could think about.
I am envisioning like Kenny G, which totally dates us, but
Wow. No,
I
dates. Yeah, I
know.
would not have said that, but that's fair. Yeah,
All
nice.
right. I wish I had learned sooner that clear is kind
Hmm.
and that clear is an emotionally intelligent approach.
Nice.
hmm Uh, okay, let's twist this service. We always ask about how we're going to
Hmm.
serve in the coming week, but can we
Hmm.
link emotional intelligence perhaps to what service looks like for us?
That's an interesting question. What I think
Yeah.
about, I'm going to try and make this as succinct as possible. I truly believe that knowledge of self and the understanding of the emotions that kind of go through us is really important. So for me, my service I work in service for people every day, all day long. Like it's
hmm
literally from 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. But I
hmm
think giving myself space and time to just like recharge and allow those
hmm
emotions to recharge, I think will be really valuable. How about you?
I have an opportunity coming up next week to do another full day facilitation with some
Mm,
senior leaders in the university.
mm-hmm,
And it is all framed around the coach approach to leadership.
mm,
And a
nice.
coach approach is an emotionally intelligent approach. And
Yeah.
so to be able to link together a bunch of concepts to hopefully give leaders
Mm-hmm,
some new toolkits or the ability to sharpen an existing toolkit in this
mm-hmm,
coaching realm
mm-hmm.
is just such a exciting place for me to serve, truly.
That's cool. What's your key
Hmm.
takeaway from you and I sitting here and talking about emotional intelligence for whatever, half an hour?
I know, right? And I don't think I languaged it specifically, but my key takeaway is that working with someone who is emotionally intelligent, but also someone who is trained similarly to I am, allows you and I to have, I think, different conversations as colleagues
Yeah.
than I have ever been able to have with colleagues
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And so, do you need to be certified in EQI
No.
2.0 to have these conversations with you? No,
Yeah.
but can you find a shared common language around
Mm-hmm.
emotion?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that is, it
Mm-hmm.
leads to really powerful partnerships kind of anywhere, but certainly
Mm-hmm.
I believe in between the two of us. So
Yeah.
I think this
Nice.
whole conversation is a demonstration of that.
Cool.
Hmm.
For me, it's the linking between our emotions, our strengths, our values. There's ties, there's weaves of threads between all of them, and the power comes in finding those threads.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, nothing about us as a human being is siloed.
No.
Everything is
Yeah,
connected.
they're all connected. Yeah. Awesome.
Hmm. Look at that. We just chatted for 30 minutes on emotional intelligence. We had no idea how this was going to go. And so you talk about trusting the process or trusting
Yeah.
yourself and each other and just trying it
Yeah.
and amazing what can happen. So we are winding down the semester, which means we get a little bit more flexibility on what topics we're going to bring you for the next week
Hmm.
or two before we take a break. So we'll see what happens next week.
Awesome. See you
All right.
later.
See ya. Thanks for tuning in to the Career Boosters podcast. We hope you had a blast. Yeah, we know that's corny. Catch you next time, and remember to subscribe wherever you enjoy podcasts.